Came here to see tonight speak, correct? So I'll do a little bit of an intro. We got Talib Kweli here to talk to us this evening, and you know, I can only personally say, I'll introduce myself very quickly. My name's Darcy. I'm a rap reporter. I write with Cult Montreal. I used to work with Mirror. I've worked with CJLO over the years, and I spend my life talking to rappers and beat makers and that type of thing. And you know, I can't even pretend like I can't look at you and say one of the reasons that I don't do that is because of the individual that we have here tonight. You know, I'll say this. In my role as a music critic and just as a sort of active observer of concerts and shows, Talib Kweli is the person that I've seen perform the most live ever. For one reason and another, but throughout time, I've gotten to see Talib play from, you know, small clubs to arenas to free outdoor shows to community events, top to bottom. The man never fails to deliver, and I think that you know, if you look right back to the later '90s when Talib Kweli and Mos Def broke through as Black Star, there are people in my generation. I could say I got to be there for Public Enemy myself, but for one step of a generation down, I think that Black Star and by extension Reflection Eternal and Talib Kweli represent that sort of social consciousness in hip hop music in a way that you know, very many have tried, very few have accomplished. So with that, I'd like everybody to put their hands together to welcome Mr. Talib Kweli to the stage.
Hello, how y'all doing?
How are you doing tonight, Talib?
Pretty good, pretty good.
So, are you out on the road right now? Are you on tour? What brings you to Montreal? We got you here for a celebration. If you don't know, the theater that you're playing is for a skate company that celebrates every year with a notable rapper, and they've invited you tonight. But what are you? Are you out on the road currently, or is this a spot date?
I live on the road. I'm always on the road. I'm the most touringest rapper since the Roots retired.
And with these, I mean, when you go from city to city, is this the type of thing you do fairly often, or and how do you fit it into your schedule? Do you have like schools come to you and want you to speak, or like in a situation like this where, you know, it's this a cultural center that has invited you, and like, how do these things play out for you when you go out and you want to speak to people? What is it that you are hoping to reach?
I do these type of things often with schools. This is a little different because I'm still wrapping my head around what Phi Center is, you know, in a beautiful way, you know. But yeah, I mean, I do this type of thing. I always want the focus to be on the music, you know, but, you know, this is nice. It's nice to be able to just have a conversation and to engage culturally without having to, you know, sweat through my shirt. You know?
So, all right, well, let's go back way some and talk about some music. And I mean, I heard the manifesto. I mean, that was where I came in, and hearing you as a solo artist and with Tech was the manifesto. And that at that time, that was just like this joint on Lyricist Lounge, like with all this other music that was dope. But I kind of looked back today and looked at the lyrics to that song, and you haven't dropped from the commitment that you made. And that 10-point agenda of how to serve yourself better through hip-hop music, it's not something that you let go of. How do you feel that, you know, activism in general, if we're going to speak about music and you know, black music as a vehicle for social change, for everybody concerned that's listening to it, what do you fear gets lost, and what do you feel is something that a capacity that rappers who maybe aren't as identified with consciousness, quote unquote, what gets lost with some of the good that mainstream rappers actually do?
Well, you know, activism and any type of wishing for revolution is a real personal thing. So in regards to the manifesto, that wasn't something I wrote for other MCs. That was something I wrote for myself. So it was a manifesto for myself, and I'm happy that, you know, 15 years later, I can sit here on the stage with you and you can say, oh, I feel like you stuck to that. Well, you know, it was definitely for me. As far as mainstream artists, recently, excuse me, pardon me. Recently, The Game did a song about Ferguson and about Mike Brown. Mm-hmm. And it was The Game featuring Diddy, Fabulous, Rick Ross, Yo Gotti, Problem, and a whole host of other rappers who are not known for conscious or progressive message music. And you know, I was happy when I heard it. I was just very, very, I was ecstatic. I was like, yeah, this is exactly right. This is what we need to be doing. But what I saw more than people being happy about it in the conscious activist community was people upset at it. And people saying, these artists are being hypocritical. And saying, I don't want to hear this from these guys. I want to hear this song from Lupe and the Mortal Technique and Common, you know? Mm. And I just think that's backwards hustling. You know, it's like when artists are followers, artists have huge egos. They want everybody to like them. So artists are going to do what the people demand. And if the people demand messaging in the music, then you're going to hear that from the artists. What we see with Ferguson and the Mike Brown situation is a demand for people to step up. And so the artists, led by Game in this particular situation, stepped up. It's not what they usually do. They usually rap about shooting people, you know? But in this situation, they stepped up. And if we're going to be dismissive when they step up, then why should they ever step up?
Well, why do you think people are being dismissive in a case like that? Is it as simple as to say that you think that people are just, oh, they're just being opportunistic. They're just making that joint right now. Is that, or is it that people really want their messengers to reflect them more?
I think people are just so damaged by hip-hop and the messaging from mainstream corporate hip-hop. People, especially women, are so damaged by the messaging and how violent and misogynistic and abusive it's been, and how insincere it's been, and how greedy it's been, and how capitalistic it's been, that they become dismissive of the genre as a whole, and it makes them not realize their part in it, is that their dismissiveness of it is adding to the problem. You know, if you don't participate in it, if you don't support it actively, then it's going to become cookie cutter. It's going to become assembly line rap. It's going to become rap that's just put out to make a profit. And rap that's just put out to, hip-hop that's just put out to make a profit is going to be violent. It's going to be misogynistic. It's going to be capitalistic. It's going to be dealing with bass as opposed to dealing with, you know, the higher level of what we can be talking about to advance ourselves. And if we have a generation that has learned how to actively not support artists. You know, at this point, we pat ourselves on the back for not supporting art. We think that we're sticking the middle finger to the man, you know, and not even realizing that man that you talk about as far as music business don't even exist. Music business don't exist. Mm-hmm. Even artists that are huge mainstream artists in hip-hop, whether it's Drake or Kendrick Lamar, started because people went to their websites and rocked with them first. And then the major labels and the labels came after the fact and helped them to get to put it out with major distribution. But that wouldn't happen if the people didn't already do. Even somebody like Kanye, you don't care about what Kanye West does because of anything that Def Jam does. You care about it because Kanye went on his Twitter and said, I'm dropping a new album, and I'm not even putting no artwork on it, and I'm going to do an anti-marketing campaign, and if you rock with me, you rock with me. You don't care about Beyonce because of whatever, because she's on Columbia. She just said, I'm putting out my album. I'm Beyonce. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and you know, and it's interesting that you would bring up Kanye. So I want to say the first time I ever saw Talib rock live in Montreal, and I believe it was your first show. You may not recall, but it was around 2002, and it was at the Medley. If people from here remember that place, and so was anybody at that show that night? Yeah, I know, because my friends aren't putting their hand up that were there. So who was there? So do you guys remember who came out on stage with Talib that night? You remember? Yeah, Bad News Respect. Bad News Brown was on stage. Talib,
GLC.
That's it. Was, you know, but you had.
No, I say that because GLC always reminds me of the fact that I brought him to Montreal.
Yeah.
Every time I see him.
Really? But why? Why that specifically though? Why GLC specific?
No, because I know you're about to go say Kanye.
Yeah, for sure.
Throw him off
for
with
sure.
the GLC.
For sure. It was when we still were like, oh, it's Kane West is on stage. It was like that, and he was just wearing his like LRG freebies up there with you. But you brought him out, and it sort of ushered in an era where you know what? Let me backtrack. It didn't usher in any era, but we started to go, wait a second, maybe there's a potential for somebody to break through in the mainstream who's going to say something. The thing about I always think about Kanye is when his production company was A Guy Called West, and he came through with that sort of aesthetic and said, I'm going to try and marry these ideas. Well, he went off and became Kanye. It didn't shoot off the era of conscious rap in the mainstream in any way, shape, or form.
Well, no, I think it did. You know, Kanye West is partially responsible for an artist like Lupe Fiasco being able to have mainstream success doing strictly conscious music. Even as singles, they could sound pop, whatever, with the production. But what Lupe has always talked about has been super conscious, super on a level. He signed Common. You know, he threw his weight behind me. He threw his weight behind Mos Def. It's because of people like Kanye West and people like Dave Chappelle and people like The Roots who have been able to get in the mainstream. That this is still even a viable thing. I mean, and even on his own records, you know, and this is something, you know, I think about this often because I see people getting caught up when they talk about Kanye in, you know, what he's wearing or who he's fucking, you know. That's what they really could be concerned about, for real. You know, that's really what.
No, for sure. There's millions and millions of people talking about Kanye who've never heard a fucking record. No, for sure.
Right, and it's like they missed the jewels. They missed the fact that he's talking about the prison industrial complex. He's the biggest mainstream black artist in the world, and he's talking actively about the prison industrial complex. He's got songs called New Slaves. You know what I'm saying? Even when you talk about him and his wife, he's comparing himself to King Kong. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is like, you know, Richard Wright, James Baldwin level type of shit. You know what I'm saying? But people are focused on the celebrity. They're focused on the branding of it that they're missing. That even before that album, when you think about Watch the Throne, when you think about what Kanye and Jay-Z were saying about Chicago 3 years ago on Watch the Throne, but people was caught up in the branding of it and who they sleeping with, as opposed to what these MCs and these young black men with a microphone who can say whatever they want. They can say whatever they want. And they talking about Chirac, and they talking about the prison industrial complex, but people caught up in the singles or the hype or the fashion or whatever, the gossip.
I'm definitely not saying that Kanye stepped off his messaging, but it is a question that it's like, are you listening? And you know, to that end, I could think of it like this: like, is an artist's lyrical content as important as the impact that they can make? And I'm talking about specifically hip hop. We could apply it to any other genre. But, you know, the truth of the matter is, if fucking Tyler, the Creator, or Chief Keef, despite what I think of them on tape, did something for their community, I could respect that. I don't want to hear about that. And that's not to call out two specific artists, but to give an example, I don't give a shit what somebody's talking about on tape if they're giving back to their community. They don't have to be talking about that all the time, but it's like there's no checks and balances there in that regard.
No, I completely agree with you. I want my artists to have contradictions. I need that. I need my artists to have vices and contradictions and shit about them that I don't like. You know, I can't trust somebody who don't got no vices and no contradictions. You know what I'm saying? All of us, everybody in this room got vices and contradictions. Why should any artist be different? Why should we be like, I have plenty of contradictions, but Kanye, you can't say one thing I agree with today and something I disagree with tomorrow, or else I'm never buying another one of your records again.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, and that's how people, you know, and people feel like we all, because of social media and all, we feel like our opinions on the matter have been elevated to the level of you know, we always have to have commentary on. But I mean, I'm very biased because I live the life of an artist. So it's within my self-interest that people separate the art from the person. But I do feel like even before I became an artist for a living, that I always able to separate the artist from the person. We can't be hypocrites about it. You can't be like, okay, I don't listen to Tyler, Creator, because he said some misogynistic lyrics, but I love Biggie and Eminem. You can't be like, I don't listen to Chris Brown because he put his hands on Rihanna, but I love Miles Davis. Like he ain't put his hands on Cicely Tyson. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And it's like we have to, you know, we have to acknowledge the good and the bad. We have to say, you know, Miles was dead wrong for that. But it doesn't change how I feel about him as an artist. You have to separate the person.
That makes this, and I'm going to go back again. So we talked about the manifesto a bit, but there's that track, the human element, does some things bad, does some things good. And I think that the idea of creating a dialogue, and I want to ask you about what you said with Billboard last week. I don't know if people read the article Talib featured in Billboard last week, but about being in Ferguson and about your roots as an artist in the activist movement. But you ended that in stating that, you know, the realities from which people start out in life need to be addressed to talk about a post-racial America or a post-racial society in that case. But where do you find the kind of discourse? Because you said it, like, we're just yelling into the fucking ether on the internet, right? And I look at things and I'm like, there are billions of people arguing all day now about shit nobody cares about when there's important matters to discuss. And this, in fact, hasn't unified us. This has just made us argue day in, day out about whether it's something that matters or doesn't matter. But whether I'm yelling into a comment section about Israel-Palestine or about your new single or about somebody, you know, but nobody's listening. So in establishing discourse, I think making people open their ears is the biggest challenge, because we could talk one-on-one, and anybody, you could all in the room, you could all talk one-on-one with each other and agree on some things. But suddenly, when everybody gets to speak, I don't know if it's a too many cooks thing, and it's vital that we be able to all get our message out, but how do we get people to listen and engage, to be able to set down a parameter to say, this is how we need to speak about this issue, whether it's race, whether it's police brutality? How do we erase the bullshit and clutter of what we think we know to open up true dialogue?
I just think we have to be honest just with ourselves. I enjoy dialogue. I enjoy debate. I enjoy discourse. And I learn from it. I learn from talking to people that I don't agree with. I enjoy the challenge of making my case to someone I don't agree with. And with social media, one thing I do like about it is you get to do that publicly. You know, anybody who's ever followed me on Twitter knows that I enjoy doing that. You know, I do it all the time. You know what I'm saying? And I do it because I enjoy it. Like, you know, I get a warm, fuzzy feeling out of retweeting some shit I agree with. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I really enjoy it. But, you know, I remember a time before the internet. And I remember how important actually being someplace is. And you wouldn't say that because people got on their telephones or set telegraphs or, you know, the Pony Express or whatever was happening back in the days, you wouldn't say that was the reason why a revolution happened. You wouldn't say that phone calls and letters are the reason for the civil rights campaign. You would say it's because we saw images of people out in the street getting bit by dogs and getting sprayed by hoses. And that was too much for the consciousness of America. But then people actually had to be at them counters in Woolworths, had to be at them universities, and actually be in there going through that physically. But in this generation, millennials, sometimes we pat ourselves on the back because of our warm, fuzzy feeling we get from social network. And we clutch it there like, no, like my Facebook posts are going to change the world. You know what I'm saying? It's like we get really caught up and self-congratulatory about what we're posting on social networks. And if it's not connected to something real, it's nothing more than the warm, fuzzy feeling.
and you know, to that, I mean, for people that are activists, that are in this, that are on the ground, that are like as you've been saying, they're like bodies on the ground. Well, there are people that actually know how to work social media well within that. But what can the average person who wants to get out and protest do better for themselves on the ground, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the average person can't even do that. The average person can't leave their job and protest in their own city, much less leave and go to Ferguson, you know? So that's where the social media as a tool, and we got to be careful. It is a tool and a vehicle. It's a wonderful, beautiful tool and vehicle, but that's where you can use that to participate. You can use that to help big up somebody who's down there doing the work. You can use that to support an organization. You can use that. I mean, and that's what it's really about, organizing. It's like the social networking, when used in an organizational capacity, can be wonderful. And if you don't like what an organization is doing, start your own organization, you know. But the point is that when people get critical, when I start talking about, you know, the tweets is only but so much, and people get critical, and then I ask them, okay, let me ask you a question. Can you do more than tweet? Can you do more than post on Instagram and Facebook? And, well, of course. Well, then we agree, because that's the only point that I'm trying to make.
And actually, I'll give it up for Talib, by the way, please. Wait, listen. We don't get to sit and engage with our heroes all that often, let's be honest, right? So it's nice to hear somebody be a real person, sit down and talk in front of you. Now, you can actually hit Phi Center on Twitter right now if you got questions for Talib. There'll be a question session after, but we're also taking questions via Twitter. So if anything is like burning right now as we're speaking, tweet Phi Center and your question could come up. So now, if we're going to, you know, in talking about not so much specifically Ferguson, but just, you know what, people, how many people in the street, for example, how many people here, how many of you are students in the room right now? So, okay, so there's not a ton of you now, but we were all here for Printemps Érable, right? So, which is a play on words, which was maple spring. Érable sounding like Arab. We congratulatorily gave ourselves a title of Printemps Érable. But now, and listen, I don't want to decry. I wasn't a student during the uprising, and it came to include much more of a representation than students who were upset about tuition hikes and a government who broke promises. These are reasons to be out in the street. And what you're saying, but you know, you have a job, you have a thing, you can't go and be, well, so in this case, I think the students were ill-served by the fact that they're students. Now, they're off for the summer, they conveniently get to go protest in the street. And we had this sort of civic uprising of privilege, which is what I think a lot of people had a hard time getting their heads around, whatever side you happen to be on. You know, you start to hear people be, you know, if you were a student out in the street, you were being attacked by people from their own computer because you had an iPad. And people calling it, this is the iPad student revolution. Like, well, what is that? You're just name calling from the suburbs because somebody blocked your fucking bridge today. And you can't just accept, well, okay, the price of an education got to be higher or whatever. But we saw this shit, and it stopped life as we knew it in this city, and it was, as far as I'm concerned, an uprising of privilege. When you have an uprising because somebody is putting a gun to your head, because an innocent person is being murdered in the street, regardless their color, you know, tensions are high. Tensions get high. What can people do better to serve, you know, beyond just being honest with themselves, but what can people do better to serve them and the person behind them in a protest situation? If you do go out on the street and you take the day off to go and you know, stand up for what you believe in, wherever it is, what can you do better to help and inform the person beside you and why you're there in that united cause?
Well, I think the first word that is something you just said, which is help. If you're going to participate in a protest movement, if you're going to join an organization, you're not going there because of your ego. You've got to be careful not to go there because you're trying to make yourself feel better. You're going there to really help, and you have to look at yourself as a servant and approach the situation as a servant. I'm here to serve. Even if you don't quite get the direction, maybe give it a chance, you know. 3 strikes, you're out. If you don't get what they're doing 3 times, maybe I can't rock with y'all no more. But, you know, show up as a servant of the people as opposed to, you know, trying to show up like, well, I have my own ideas of how things should work. If that's the case, start your own organization, I guess. You want to be honest, you want to be a student, and you want to be compassionate. I think compassion is the most important thing. I think when we talk about beyond, racism, beyond white supremacy, beyond the prison industrial complex, beyond politics, beyond, any of this, is at the heart of it compassion. Putting yourself in the shoes of the next man or the next woman and understanding that somebody else cross to bear might be different than yours. Someone else's struggle might be different than yours. And try to put yourself in their shoes. When you talk about privilege, the problem with privilege is that people who have privilege lack the ability to put themselves in someone else's shoes. They don't have these experiences, so they think these experiences don't exist. Their scope is so narrow, they think that everyone has got it like them. And that doesn't even make you a bad person. It just makes you super ignorant, but it don't make you bad. You know what I'm saying? Like some of the nicest people in the world are super privileged and don't know it, and don't understand their privilege, and don't understand. You have even on with the police force, you have the police force at this point. Job is to protect your privilege, to protect the property, and you have cops who don't know that. Who are good, genuine people who think, I want to serve my community. You know what? My community is underrepresented by police who know this community. So I want to be a peace officer, and I want to protect the rights of the citizens. And they may not know, or maybe they do know, but they may not look at history or politics the way that I do. Whereas I look at history and politics is the police job, regardless of what it was supposed to be, has become the job of oppressing poor people, oppressing people of color. Like, this is your job description. If you enjoy a life of privilege, the police are here to protect your rights and to protect your privilege. And so it doesn't mean that there's no good police officers. I mean, or everybody's bad, or everybody, it just means that people don't recognize when they're being inconsiderate, when they're lacking compassion, especially in countries that claim to be Christian countries, And I see the most hateful, vile, non-Christian themes spoken by people, written by people in the name of Jesus. You know what I'm saying? Like, talk about how Christian they are. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I just think it comes from a lack of compassion. I'm not religious. I'm not a Christian. But one thing I respect about the teachings of Jesus the Christ is the compassion, and that's something that I think is really, 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 really missing on every side. You have activists that come from a place of hate and anger and pain and lack compassion. That exists too, but that's not a problem that's killing our babies in the street. So I don't speak on that as often.
Word. So, artist activism, and I thought it was really interesting. You were saying that you've been meeting with Harry Belafonte, and that that you learned about was Dream Defenders, is that the name of the association? Yeah. But that are fighting these stand your ground laws down in Florida. And I thought it was interesting that you said this guy is not trying to figure out how to use Facebook or whatever. He told me about this, and that by the same token, there are people who are just thinking that when they hit that retweet button, they've done their job, as you've illustrated. But what is it? What role because times have changed as well since Mr. Belafonte's time, and and then of course it's easy to get labeled in our climate of music and of rap music. This kind of hip hop, that kind of hip hop. If you just have a message and you're an artist, what are the kind of things that can be, sort of refined in being able to get a message out? Whether it's from song lyrics to the places that an artist align themselves. What are some of the important differences in our reality today of sort of everything being one day to the next? Like like an artist could put out a video every week right now if you felt like it or whatever.
Yeah, it's very tricky with the art and the activism, because art has to be organic, and it has to be. You can't go into art trying to prove a point. You can't go into making art trying to have a message. At least that's what I believe. Not every artist agrees with that. As a matter of fact, there are artists who I'm fans of who probably would totally disagree with that. You know, who say I'm an activist first and I do this music because I'm talented at it and it's a platform to get my activism out. I'm talking like Boots from the Coup, Dead Prez, Rebel Diaz, Mortal Technique. Like these are people, not friends and family of mine that I roll with, that I hang out with, but I look at it a little different. Recently, there's a guy named Sean King who did a petition on change.org. We had a 7-point plan of federal laws that we could have that would combat police brutality. Right. One of them was, making the chokehold that they use on Eric Garner like illegal, even though it was already illegal, but making it illegal throughout the whole country. It was legal in New York already. The body cams. He had a bunch of other things. Sean King, you go on and he has right now. He has like I think 600,000 people who signed this. He started it like 3 weeks ago. But I bring him up to say that he hit me on the email, hit me with a bunch of other artists, Lettucey, and a whole bunch of other artists. And he was like, we should do a song, and we should maybe do a song and drop a song every week, like every time we get another 100,000 people to sign up to these things. And I'm like, hey, hold on, slow down. I'm down to do the song, but what if we get to the level and then we promise the people the song, and we're not satisfied with what we came with. When we start having to do music based on these movements, it taints the music, And then you have, with all due respect to artists who put the struggle first, in my experience as an artist who's been involved in activism, you have groups who follow activist movements around and make music about that, and that's what their career be. You know what I'm saying? And that seems a little insincere to me. I think art has to be, art to me is essentially an expression of love. So when you make art about going to the strip club and popping bands, you're really making music about a lack of love. You know what I'm saying? When you make a song about I'm standing up for the people, it's because you're in love with the people. Mm-hmm. But it all boils down to love and not having love. And I think that art has to focus on that. As artists, we have a platform, we can speak to people, but when you try to put it too much into the music, it taints it. And that's why when you approach it like I'm this and I'm that and I'm this and I'm that, you're putting yourself in a box. It's the same reason why no one listens to neo-soul music no more. Because what they were doing wasn't neo-soul music, it was just good-ass music. It was just soul music that was based on our traditions. But the industry, in order to sell it, had to find a term or had to brand it in a way. And when you brand something like that, it gets old quick, And so now you have a bunch of artists who are great, like a Jill Scott or a Bilal or a D'Angelo or Erykah Badu, who have to fight this neo-soul tag when they're far more talented than many of the musicians that are popular today.
Well, and look, I would add you on that list, and I want to ask you, how have you managed to what do you think has kept you unique in a sense where you're an artist who has lent credibility to the mainstream and given the underground a sense that you can be a superstar in this underground and have a name out without compromising? What has kept you unique? Because people talk about rappers that have been around for X amount of life, like there's a fucking shelf life of some kind, and you're still Talib Kweli. You're still respected by the peers that influenced you and the kids coming up. What gives you that edge?
I really think it's about the kids coming up. I've always been I've tried to be someone who is not judgmental when I listen to music. You ever watch The Muppets?
Yeah, sure.
I'm showing my age right now. Who Waldorf and Statler are from The Muppets?
Sure.
The two old men, and they be in the balcony making fun of everything. Like, that's what a lot of hip-hop has become. It's a lot of Waldorf and Statlers in hip-hop. You know what I'm saying? Like, old men just in the balcony because they don't understand anything that's going on, and they just got jokes about it. You know what I'm saying? And the reason that exists is because, look, music is based on region and emotion. It's based on where you grew up at, what was going on around that time, when you came of age, and your emotional mind state. So when you were in high school, when you were in college, everybody in this room, you were in high school and college, nothing is better than the music that you were listening to in high school and college. It don't matter what you were listening to. Everybody in this room has that same experience. Nothing is better. Nothing will ever be better than what you listened to in high school and college, because that's when you were discovering who you were. And when you're discovering who you are, you attach music to it. You use music to tell people who you are. I am this type of person because I listen to Tupac. I'm this type of person because I like Drake. I'm this type of person because I like Nina Simone. And that's my identity. And when I tell people I listen to Nina Simone, they know where I stand. And so when that happens, it makes it hard for you to look outside the box. Now, me, I've tried to separate what I grew up on and what my sensibilities tell me is dope, and try to still appreciate what's coming next. The Locks, I learned from the Locks. Went to a party early in my career when I was first starting. The Locks was first starting. And when the Locks was first starting, they were on Bad Boy. Now you might see us on the bill together. Nostalgic, throwback, underground rap, whatever. But it's like, man, look. It just bugs me out how I remember when the Locks was Drake and Lil Wayne.
Yeah, sure.
I remember when Biggie was Drake and Lil Wayne. Everybody was like, that's the old school hip hop. We nostalgic about it. You know what I'm saying? So it's like I've seen enough seasons to know that all that is false. You know, it's like these guys came up to me at a party and I'm looking at them like, there's a lot of locks. But they so gangster, they wouldn't know who I am. I'm just some underground MC on Ruckus. And they're like, yo, Mos Def, Kweli, we fuck with y'all. Like, and I learned a lot from that interaction. Like, let me get off that bullshit. You know, because I'm perpetuating it by thinking that there's some sort of difference. And what I learned in that moment was that this business and these people who focus on gossip and focus on drama and focus on the differences will drive a wedge between you and your fellow artists, will drive a wedge between you and your fellow black people, between you and your fellow young people, between you and your fellow poor people, and play up the differences. And when you list the similarities far outweigh the differences. The similarities between me and Rick Ross far outweigh the differences between us. But people play up the differences because it's divide and conquer. And I cannot participate in that. And so I look at all my artists as peers, and I look at all my artists as respect. And I understand that when I look at an artist like, Soulja Boy, somebody use an example all the time. Here's a guy who grew up in Atlanta, you know what I'm saying? Like listening to a whole different set of circumstances than I was listening to. How arrogant would I be to expect him to rap like he grew up on Run DMC and Wu-Tang? That would be arrogant of me. Why would I do that?
Well, and you said it, the driving of wedges are what we come to expect from artists. And it can come down to like, well, if I want to party, I'll be down with like Rick Ross. And then but where do you, where would you sort of kind of place that emphasis on kind of being able to have artists, because we can't turn around and we talked before when we talked about demanding more from you, the artists that you're listening to. But like, how the fuck am I supposed to demand Rick Ross not be that guy if I'm even still wanting to give him I'll
tell you how. We did it last year when Rick Ross had that rapey lyric. The people stepped up and demanded, and he apologized. That's how you do it. Back in the days, the people, James Brown had a conch. You know what I'm saying? And he was to please, Mr. Please, please, please. And the people was like, nah, we on this Black and I'm Proud, James Brown. And James Brown made Black and I'm Proud. And then when the people got off of Black and I'm Proud, James Brown put the conch back in. You know what I'm saying? If y'all see the Ray Charles movie, Ray Charles was going to go perform in Alabama. And the people stepped up and said, nah, Ray, we ain't on that. We put too much on our artists, expect our artists to be leaders. The artist as leader is the rare exception to the rule. The Bob Marleys of the world are the rare exceptions to the rule. That's not how most artists are. Most artists are followers. They follow where y'all go. Y'all the leaders. You know what I'm saying? Like, y'all vote with y'all dollars. Y'all demand, like, students are the leaders. Young people are the leaders. Whatever y'all want to listen to, whatever y'all want to hear, that's what they're going to play. When you listen to the radio, people complain about the radio. Look, people my age who like my type of music complain about the radio all the time. They don't play that type of music because y'all don't listen to it. Ever since the internet, y'all like, why would I sit there and listen to what I don't want to hear and go through commercials and be so, why would I do that? I could just go in. And so, in droves, people who wanted to hear conscious music and message music left listening to mainstream radio to became the haven for, white girls between 15 and 25. You know what I'm saying? So that's who they cater to. And this is real. Supply and demand. I don't know how it is here in Montreal, but in America, the FCC play with the people want to, it's like the like we control the airwaves. It belonged to the people. But we allow ourselves to be told that there's some sort of conspiracy, trying to stop the, I've read all types of things online about conspiracies in the music business about how they trying to stop the black man and keep us down, and they want to put messages in the music. What y'all talking about is white supremacy. You know what I'm saying? That has nothing to do with the music business. The music business is one small, tiny piece. And you focused on the flash of lights just because these thoughts and all these people you call ratchet is focused on the flash of lights. How you any better than them? You know what I'm saying?
And, there is a sophistication level to the way these things are manipulated. So I would ask you, it's a sort of two-sided question that comes right back down to that. If we're going to demand more from our artists, how can we demand more from our media, whether that is a corporately owned media or an independent media or a self-made media? And how can we demand more from our police forces who are supposed to, work with communities? And that's long since gone. I don't think people even have an idea anymore what police are supposed to or not supposed to do for us. And we don't have any relationship to the idea, and they have no relationship to us. How can we as individuals demand more from our social structures and from the voices that are supposed to represent us, whether that's, outside of music and outside of arts, the establishment? How do we fit in it as individuals?
Well, that's where social media and comes in, and part of the reason why I went to Ferguson is to sort of put my money where my mouth is and show that we have to have our own narratives, and we have to have a unified voice about how we tell our stories. We can't let the media tell our stories unchallenged. We have to force them to be honest. Whether it's people going down to protest movements and reporting what they see with their eyewitness, or whether it's like, the fact that TMZ could find Ray Rice footage before NFL. It's like we have to use everything at our disposal to keep the media and keep corporations that will suppress this information honest. What my strategy is to work with organizations who do it 24/7. Again, I see myself as an entertainer. I don't see myself as an activist. I don't see myself as an organizer. I see myself as a voice for those people, and a very powerful voice, and I have a platform. But there are people who do that work 24/7. I don't do that work 24/7. I rap. So whenever I get a chance to, I speak about the Dream Defenders, who you brought up, and Organization for Black Struggle, and the Advancement Project. And these are young people, these are students who have identified the problem that I feel like is the biggest problem that causes everything we're talking about. The root of it, to me, is white supremacy. Dun, 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 dun. People get scared when I say that. Yeah, sure. But look, the fact is that back in the days, these governments were run by white supremacists. Not to say that they're not now, but people will try to convince you they're not now.
The blueprint was well left behind.
People will try to convince you that they are, but it's a harder point to prove. They are. We can all agree that back in the days they was run by white supremacists. Like that's it's a fact. And so these white supremacists are very smart and very shrewd, and put systems in place in academics, in the banking system, in economics, in the politics, in the hospitals, and everything they could do to ensure that their children and the children of their children and their children and their ancestors continue to live a life of privilege and continue to benefit from their decision-making. And so that's just, these systems are real and they work. And the most dangerous, to me, system that's in place is the prison industrial complex and the school to prison pipeline, and how they have young people of color and young poor people going straight from, you get the police in the schools now, in the junior high schools. It's like, okay, we don't have slavery no more. We still need the slave labor. How can we, it's like Jim Crow. It's like the new Jim Crow book that Michelle Alexander wrote. That's exactly what it is. And what we see now is, now you have the military industrial complex enforcing the prison industrial complex. Now they can't kill these niggas fast enough. Now they just show up with the riot gear immediately. You know what I'm saying? Like before anything pop off.
you know, throwing a bottle like what you dealt with in Ferguson. And you know, what do we need? That was a plastic bottle, I assume, and the headlines couldn't even get that shit right. You know, I mean, we can't. I mean, we can't even begin to fathom that it's not a conspiracy, that it's the truth.
Yeah.
If you start to say that it's
That's
this
the
thing and that,
distraction.
then another, and it's like, well, that's fucking crazy. And it's like, no, it's not. It's that, like, literally the 23 people that got off the Mayflower already had this shit running in their minds.
Yeah, it's not a conspiracy. Like when it's because it's like it's right there in your face. No one's trying to hide anything. You know, it's like this is the plan. You know, this is exactly when you see Mike Brown shot in the street, that's how they want it to be. You know what I'm saying?
And that sophistication of being able to draw attention into something, and what you went up with Don Lemon, who wants to, as soon as you tell your side of the story, which ostensibly is what you were there to do, you got to reframe the whole narrative back to just protect the interests of his employer, who owns his employer, and their sources, who are evidently the police. Because he's cutting you off to tell you what the police said when they were standing in front of you armed with fucking gun at your head. Now look, I'm lucky enough in my life to have not been thrown down to the ground and had that kind of violence in my day-to-day. But it's coming. And you know, what can we do to prepare? How can we see it coming? What should we look out for? And if we're going to look just at the media, what can we look for in the messaging that the mainstream media headlines with, or captions with, or feeds to us?
I think we have to look for similarities. We have to not be, especially this for people who are in the community, organizing, being activists. Sometimes we get so caught up into what we're doing, we're quick to cut people off, and we're quick to be like, you know what, that's my enemy. He's not on what I'm on. I'm not even. And we have to focus on the similarities rather than the differences, and build alliances based on those similarities. You don't have to agree with everything the next man say. You find what you agree on, and you move from that. And when you see a situation like Ferguson, you see a lot of that. There was a group of clergymen out there. There were young people out there, young black boys with bandanas around their face. There was the Dream Defenders out there. There was all people with different philosophies. There was Amnesty International. There was people who different. There was a New Black Panthers. You know what I'm saying? Like, there was people with all different philosophies who didn't all get along. You know what I'm saying? But what everybody had in common was the strongest thing, and that's how I think the only way to move forward is to not focus so much on the differences, but focus on the similarities.
So we got bodies on the ground right here tonight that came out. I gather that we hopefully still have time for some questions. And I'm looking for a sign that someone can take some questions from the floor. So do we, Renell, have a few minutes for questions? Yeah. So, all right. So who's got a question for Talib? Put your hand up really, really fast. You with your hand up at the back, right down the middle. And then we got 2, 3. Make a little line up here. Maybe you got your hand up there to my left. And okay, cool.
I guess I'll go up to the front table. Hi. Hello. My name is Nairi.
How you doing?
I guess my question is a little bit more about activism, although you don't consider yourself an activist necessarily. I've been involved in a bunch of social movements, exclusively left-wing progressive stuff. I've even run for city council, and one thing that I find extremely difficult is not convincing necessarily, but showing somebody who, I think that most people are convinced of what they believe in, even when they're not very well informed. And the thing that I find most difficult is getting somebody to like maybe open up about that and actually listen to somebody who maybe has a different point of view, or to, I mean, you touched on it a little bit when you were talking about like there's like a lack of compassion, a lack of love and everything, but what do you think, and you did talk about like, you know, people vote with their dollars and everything, but what do you think is perhaps an effective way, given that you've been in Ferguson and you've been speaking to a lot of people, what do you think is an effective way to get people to not necessarily change their minds, but just kind of like look at something in a different way, especially when it's like they some people don't even know about something and are very reticent to know more about it, just because maybe they're afraid or whatever. But what do you think is a good way to just get people to like kind of put their barriers down and just, you know, listen to something that doesn't even interest them,
right.
you know?
Well, I think that's the key right there. You have to find a way to personalize it and make it interesting to them. It's like, you know, I come from educators, and the best teachers find a way to apply knowledge practically and not just teach it in the classroom. But why do I need to learn this? How does it serve me? You know, as people, we're genuinely selfish people. Like, people form relationships with other people based on reward and what they're going to get out of it. That's just our nature as human beings. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. It's just how we are. When Dick Cheney found out that he had a daughter that was gay, it made him understand the issue a little bit more. You know, one of the most effective things I've seen as far as getting people to understand the problem with the police presence in Ferguson is when you hear from military people and we hear from people who actually were in Afghanistan and were in Iraq. It was like, yo, we didn't have that level of equipment. And we were fighting people who were not citizens of our country, but they had us out here thinking we about to fight some enemy, and we didn't have that. You know, so I think it's about finding that where that person can relate to it on a personal level. And, you know, I think people lack compassion because you're right. And I think now we dig into our positions deeper, because now it's even easier to be dismissive. Like, you know, I could say something that might be true, and I could be like, okay, well, I got the information from the ACLU, and somebody be like, oh, well, you know, they're liberal and progressive, so I don't care what they got to say, even though it's true. You know, and so now we politicize everything. People take sides automatically on the internet, and it's like that's become a thing, to where it's like to dismiss you, to be so extra dismissive of the facts. The facts just, you know, have no relevance to the conversation.
Thank you for your question. So
we have a question back here. After it's you.
Hey, what's going on?
Peace.
My name's Widget. Good to meet you, bro. First things first, I'd like to say, you know, I appreciate you coming out here and sharing your knowledge with everybody. It's not many artists that will actually do that, sit down like this and be real genuine.
I appreciate y'all.
This is a question about hip-hop, specifically the hip-hop community in Montreal. Like, a lot of people think that it's non-existent, but there is a hip-hop community. And it's just because I'm a hip-hop artist myself, you know what I'm saying, from Montreal. I got a couple of hip-hop artists in the back as well. And, like, basically, like, how Montreal is very, very segregated. Like, there's a lot of language barriers. There's a lot of, like, just area barriers where everybody's in their own corner. They don't want to, like, kind of get together and support each other as far as hip-hop is concerned. So I was just wondering what would be a good way to kind of like get everybody to wake up, because I also have a radio show every Wednesday from 3 to 5, hip-hop radio show. You know what I'm saying? CKUT 90.3 FM. And I hear a lot of Montreal talent, and we do have a lot of talent that deserves the support, you know? And basically I want to know what would be a good way to kind of wake everybody up to realize that we do have a hip-hop community and the talent is here, but we just got to support each other and, like, you know, give everybody what they really deserve, because there's a lot of talented artists out here, me being one of them.
Well, it sounds to me like you speaking truth to power and that you're already doing it. You said you had the radio station, everybody cheered and clapped, and that's what it is. As an artist, you have to come up in your own backyard, and it's very, very important to your career. You'll have to support each other. You know, anytime an artist, a hip-hop artist, you talk about the hip-hop community in Montreal, anytime an artist has a show, every other single artist should be there. You know,
Exactly.
And that's how it's got to be. You got to move as a city. That doesn't mean everybody can rap the same. Doesn't mean everybody got to look the same, be the same. It doesn't even mean everybody got to get along. It just means that, you know, like we talk about with the activist thing, like put aside the differences, focus on similarities. If everybody agree that Montreal is underrepresented on the hip hop scene, and everybody agree that Montreal there's talent that's not being appreciated, then we all move together until one person pop off and open the door for everybody.
Good night. Good night.
Please.
I'm a recording artist as well. Just had, I can elaborate very briefly and then I'll ask a question, but I'm just thinking about your right-hand man, Mos Def, and his new influence in Africa. Now he's spending a lot of time in South Africa. And I'm an African as well, Central African. I'm thinking about, and I live in New York, so I'm thinking about like the fact that we're talking about this white supremacy and these instilled systems that have been going on for hundreds of years that took a lot of funding and genius to create of how to separate and segregate and the people and make like this outcome that we see is happening today. And just thinking about the future of African Americans and the future about Africa, I'm thinking in kind of in Mos Def's correct direction, the fact that you guys are so close. I'm sure in some way you've had the conversations and you can relate. But, you know, I asked the question like, okay, we have this issue that we're fighting with a culture that tells us, that was branded off of like dance and music and togetherness, but it's also branded off of like battling and like the fact that you got the best bars, you got the best moves can prevail and like you kind of shut down the guys that you're going against. And I look at like in the industry and in the direction of this culture, we've always told ourselves that we can be better, we can push harder, we're like to kind of to give the best that we can, but the fact that the industry has been able to dive into that and make it a commercial thing, we've been misguided to what the source is and taught to follow this. And I'm saying all this to say that because we're so kind of misguided in culture to a degree of what's happening in pop and what's happening here, as a people, I look at it like, how do we graduate ourselves internally? Do we stay in systems that are already instilled to destroy us? You see what's happening in Brooklyn. Or do we focus on kind of our lineage and think back, like how is before slavery in a sense the influence that we had as people, how do we connect that to what's happening in ourselves so we can feel more pride and we can feel more justice and ability to create ourselves and feel like our lives matter, you know? I feel like personally my lineage wasn't a slave lineage because the Congolese and my parents didn't have that connection. So like how do we make African Americans feel like there is a more guiding story from their lineage